This is the fastest way to learn all the grammar and vocabulary that you need to be able to speak Russian, to understand it, and also to be able to speak it, to have conversations. You don't need to study grammar rules. Russian grammar is very complicated. Vocabulary is also relatively difficult because it's very different. There aren't that many cognates, words that are similar to English. Unlike Spanish or French or even German, Russian has a very different vocab. But grammar is especially difficult for English speakers because it's very different. So, how do you learn it? You simply learn sentences. Take a list like this, thousands of sentences that include all the grammar, the common grammar that's used in regular conversation, and all the vocabulary or most of the vocabulary that shows up in regular conversation. Of course, if you are a nuclear engineer, maybe you need vocabulary that's not included here. But for regular conversation, uh, this is more than enough. You get around 10,000 words here of vocabulary. And the only thing you need to do with this is just listen and repeat the sentences over and over and over again. That's shadowing. Audio files in which the sentences, and if you can't read, it doesn't really matter because you learn to read very quickly. Because if you shadowing, especially if the sentences are repeated several times, let's say the audio file has, this is the way I like to do it. I listen to them during the day uh, while doing other things. I have them in the background and I listen to them once. So each sentence is repeated once in that audio file. But then for shadowing, the listening and repeating exercise, each sentence is repeated 5 times. So it will be, what time does the concert start? Во сколько начинается концерт? Во сколько начинается концерт? Во сколько начинается концерт? And it'll be 5 times that I'm listening to it. So I don't really need to. Do you see how you don't really need to learn, like study the writing system or anything? You'll just repeating it while having this in front of you 5 times, and then this one, and this one, and this one, each one 5 times. It's very slow per sentence, but you learn each sentence really well, and you learn you develop in fluency because you are constantly saying things aloud. So that's developing muscle memory and also pronunciation. You learning to by sheer imitation, just same sentence over and over 5 times, next sentence 5 times. You improve your pronunciation pretty fast. Still, there's specific things you should do on the side to learn pronunciation. I recommend taking a look at pronunciation guide first before you do this, so you know you have an idea of what the sounds, uh, like what the sounds are, but what each letter sounds like, things like that. But for the most part, it's just lots and lots of repetition. It should be 90%, 95% of your time just repeating lines and listening, and 5% of your time or less looking at uh, a theory about pronunciation. And you could also check the grammar rules, but again, just take a look if you're not sure. But for the most part, if you know the vocab and you've repeated thousands of sentences, they will understand you even if your grammar is a little bit off. Uh, if you just keep repeating sentences, eventually you'll get most of the conjugations right. So this is how you do it. This is how you learn grammar fast. This is also how you learn vocabulary fast. Just lots of repetition, same sentences over and over. Except as something I am going to add here before we go to before we talk about active recall. Uh, there's also another thing you can do, which is come here to the vocabulary section, and these are all the words from this text. And here with like я, вы, не, на, вы, это, мне, and with a number of times that they show up in the text. So from most frequent word, that's I. So this is in. Well, you got it here. Um, you can see that the most common words are repeated thousands of times, and then quickly frequency quickly drops. This is why learning words by frequency is good, but also can be deceiving. Um, I don't recommend you try to memorize this because you'll see them so many times that you learn them in context super easily, really fast. This, the intermediate, like what's once we get to nouns and verbs, this kind of stuff, this, the first thousand dish, I do recommend you use mnemonics because if you memorize this 30 a day, 50 a day, 100 a day with mnemonics, and then you do the shadowing and the listening, you'll you'll have a lot of words here that you just memorized with mnemonics. So you'll be reviewing them and it'll make the sentence much more comprehensible. So again, skip the like this, the pronouns and the like at and all that stuff, and like the grammar words. Skip those, and then once we get to like sorry, number, usually, movie, like again, weekend, these you can use mnemonics. You should use mnemonics. So lots of shadowing and listening. Mnemonics for the not for the top like 1% of words, but like top 2 to 10% of words. Yeah, use mnemonics for those. Most frequent, but not the completely most frequent. Just the like, not the first 50. Maybe like started from here, like 100 or so. Just like the first thousand, more or less. And finally, once you've been doing this a lot, you do active recall, my favorite part, which is translating into the target language. This is very difficult. It's also extremely effective. It's frustrating. You will need some discipline, but it's the best use of your time. It's it's the exercise that will make you speak. It's the exercise that will improve your speaking skills the most per hour that you invest doing it. Yeah, it's very simple. You just read it in English, try to say it in Russian, check. Did I say it right? Did I say it wrong? Next one, you read it in English, try to say it in Russian. Obviously, very difficult. That's why you should repeat each sentence lots of times before you try this. But once you're able to do this, you should be able to speak pretty well. If you, again, there's thousands of sentences here, but if you do around 30,000 reps of active recall, you should be able to speak the language relatively well. 30,000 reps of active recall is a lot, especially in the beginning. I recommend doing around 30,000 reps of shadowing first, then 30,000 reps of active recall. But sometimes you need even more than that of shadowing before you can do active recall fast because in the beginning it's going to be very slow and frustrating. But yeah, 30 and 30 of each active recall after the shadowing, of course, and you should be able to speak pretty well. And you can do this in a couple of months if you work hard. Again, this is not the lazy way. This is not for. This is all for people who want to learn effortlessly, things like that. No, this is very hard work. But if you do it, yeah, you can get results very quickly in Russian or any other language.